The day before my granddaughter's wedding, her fiancé smiled at me with teeth as sharp and cold as a winter moon. "You know what would be the perfect wedding gift, Eleanor?" he said, his voice slick as oil. "You disappearing from our lives forever." So I granted his wish. My name is Grace Vance and I am 70 years old. I have buried a husband, built a business from the ground up, and weathered more storms than the old oak tree in my backyard. I do not scare easily. But that night, in the glittering haze of the rehearsal dinner, a chill settled deep into my bones, a cold that had nothing to do with my age. The grand ballroom of the Crestmore Hotel was a symphony of wealth I had paid for. Crystal glinted, champagne bubbled, and the air was thick with the perfume of gardenias and old money. And there, in the center of it all, was my Lily, my granddaughter, the light of my life since her own parents were taken too soon. She was 24, draped in silk and radiant with the joy I so desperately wanted to share. Her blonde hair was a cascade of sunshine, her smile so wide and trusting it made my heart ache. But my eyes, old and tired as they are, were fixed on him. Julian Thorne. He stood beside her, a handsome devil with a jawline you could cut yourself on and eyes that never quite held their warmth. He was whispering in her ear and she laughed, a sound like bells, before glancing my way with a look that was apologetic, dismissive. I felt the familiar knot of unease tighten in my stomach. "Eleanor." His voice was at my elbow. Julian, with that practiced, empty smile. "Might I have a word? In private?" I followed him, my pearl-handled cane tapping a slow, deliberate rhythm on the marble floor. We slipped into the hotel's library, a room that smelled of rich leather and solitude. He closed the heavy mahogany door, and the noise of the party vanished, replaced by a silence that screamed. He didn't bother with a drink. He just turned, and the smile fell from his face like a discarded mask. "Let's not waste time, Eleanor," he began, his tone shifting from respectful grandson to something far more condescending. "Lily and I have been discussing our future. Our life together as a married couple." "Naturally," I said, my voice steady, though my knuckles were white on the head of my cane. "We want a clean slate," he continued, pacing slowly before the fireplace like a lawyer before a jury. "New life, new priorities. Without complications." "Complications?" I asked, though I knew. Oh, I knew. He stopped and looked at me, his gaze flat and cold. "We don't want you in our lives anymore, Eleanor. After tomorrow we think it would be best if you just disappeared. Permanently." The words didn't just hang in the air. They seeped into the very walls, poisoning the room. I stared at this boy, this 40-year-old boy, who had the audacity to stand in a room I was paying for and tell me I was obsolete. "I beg your pardon?" I whispered, the words scraping out of me. He had the gall to smile again, a cruel, satisfied twist of his lips. "I'll be direct, since you're clearly struggling to keep up. Lily agrees with me. You're too involved, too controlling. You suffocate her with your old-fashioned opinions and your constant presence. We want to build our marriage without the shadow of an overbearing grandmother looming over us. My Lily, my sweet girl. Could it be true? She said this? It was her idea," he lied smoothly. I saw the lie in the slight twitch of his eye. "She's just too kind to tell you herself. But me? I have no problem with honesty. You know what would be the perfect wedding gift? You disappearing from our lives forever." The library seemed to shrink, the shelves of books bearing witness to this profound betrayal. This man, who had never known a day of real hardship, was asking me to erase myself from the story of my own family as a present. "And if I refuse?" I asked, my voice barely a breath. He shrugged, a casual, dismissive gesture that was more insulting than any shout. "Then Lily will have to choose between her husband and her grandmother. And frankly, Eleanor, I don't like your odds. Think about it tonight. Make the right choice tomorrow." He left then, closing the door softly behind him, leaving me alone in the silent, judging room. I stood there for a long time, my reflection staring back at me from the dark window. A 70-year-old woman in a navy blue dress, her silver hair perfectly coiffed, her spine still straight. A woman who had just been deemed disposable by the child she had raised. But Julian Thorne had made a fatal error. He had mistaken my age for weakness. He had mistaken my love for Lily as a vulnerability to be exploited. He didn't know that I had spent 7 decades building a fortress of strength around my heart. And he had just handed me the key to his own destruction. The right choice. Oh, I would make a choice, all right. But it wouldn't be the one he was expecting. 3 a.m. found me not in my bed, weeping, but in my study, surrounded by the comforting ghosts of my past. Photographs of me and my late husband, Arthur, building our real estate empire. Pictures of a young Lily on my knee, her tiny hand wrapped around my finger. This house, this life was built on love and granite hard resolve. On my desk lay the deed to the Seafoam Cottage, the charming weather-beaten beach house that had been in my family for generations. Lily had loved it since she was a child, building sandcastles on the shore and falling asleep to the sound of the waves. For the last year, she had spoken of little else but how she and Julian would renovate it, fill it with children and laughter. She believed it was her wedding gift. She had even picked out paint swatches. What she didn't know was that the deed was still, and always would be, in my name alone. I poured a finger of good whiskey, Arthur's favorite, and fired up my old desktop computer. The blue light illuminated the determined lines of my face. If disappearance was the gift he wanted, I would give him a vanishing act so spectacular he would never forget it. My fingers, gnarled with arthritis but still nimble, flew across the keyboard. I composed an email to Benjamin Croft, the most ruthless real estate broker on the coast. Benjamin, the Seafoam Cottage is to be listed immediately. Yes, I know the timing is unusual. Price it to sell fast. All cash offers only. I want it gone by tomorrow evening. Eleanor. I hit send with a finality that echoed in the quiet room. One click, and the foundation of Julian's planned future crumbled to dust. Next, I opened my ancient, leather-bound address book. The first call was to Mildred "Millie" O'Malley, the caterer who had handled every significant event in my life since Arthur's funeral. "Millie," I said when her sleepy voice answered. "It's Grace Vance." "Eleanor? Good Lord, woman, the wedding is today. Has something happened?" "A slight change of plan, Millie. I need you to place a small white envelope at every single place setting at the reception. Nothing fancy. I'll have my driver bring them to the venue first thing this morning." "Envelopes?" she asked, her voice thick with sleep and confusion. "What's in them?" A slow, cold smile touched my lips. "Wedding favors, Millie. Very enlightening wedding favors." I made similar calls to the florist, the bandleader, and the wedding planner. My voice was calm, my instructions clear. I was the mother of the bride, the grandmother of the bride, making last-minute adjustments. It was expected. No one questioned it. By 4:30 a.m. my phone buzzed. "Benjamin Croft. Eleanor, you've started a war. 3 offers already, all above asking. I'll have signed papers for you by cocktail hour." The envelope I prepared for Lily's place setting was different from the others. Hers contained a copy of the real estate listing, the word "sold" stamped across it in bold red letters. The others contained a far more damning document. You see, while Julian thought I was just a doddering old woman, I had been listening. At family dinners, at holiday parties, I had listened to his stories, the boasts about his hedge funds' incredible returns, the name drops of powerful clients, the tales of his family's old money. A 70-year-old woman in the corner, sipping her tea, is practically invisible. He never noticed me filing away every inconsistency. And for the past 6 months, ever since my instincts screamed that this man was wrong for my Lily, I had put my resources to work. I hired an investigator, a quiet, efficient man named Mr. Albright. What he uncovered was a masterpiece of deception. The hedge fund? A Ponzi scheme already under SEC investigation. The family money? A line of credit from a desperate uncle that had long since dried up. The job? A hollow title at a shell company. Julian Thorne wasn't just a gold digger. He was a financial house of cards, and he was counting on my Lily and my money to keep him from collapsing. I worked through the dawn, my printer humming as it produced 67 copies of Mr. Albright's report. a concise, brutal dossier on Bradford James Mitchell III, complete with bank statements, subpoenas, and sworn testimonies from previous marks he'd left in his wake. As the sun began to paint the sky in hues of rose and gold, I sealed the last envelope. 67 white envelopes, stacked neatly in a box. Each one a grenade waiting for the pin to be pulled. I dressed carefully for my granddaughter's wedding day. An elegant lavender suit, my pearls a hint of lipstick. I looked every inch the proud matriarch. In a few hours Julian would get his wish. I would disappear from their lives. But I would leave behind a truth so loud, it would drown out all his beautiful lies. The wedding ceremony was a picture-perfect tableau of everything Julian wanted the world to see. It took place in the hotel's sun-drenched conservatory, surrounded by orchids and the gentle murmur of a string quartet. Lily was a vision, an ethereal beauty in my own wedding gown, which I had carefully preserved for her. She floated down the aisle on the arm of my brother Charles, her eyes shining with tears of happiness. And I sat in the front row, my hands folded neatly in my lap, a serene smile on my face while a storm raged within me. Every time I looked at Julian, standing so smugly at the altar, I saw the ghost of his words in the library. Disappear forever. When the minister asked, should anyone present know of any reason that this couple should not be joined in holy matrimony, speak now or forever hold your peace, the silence was absolute. I held my tongue. My objection would come later, and it would be far more potent than a simple spoken word. You may kiss the bride. Julian took Lily's face in his hands and kissed her with a theatrical passion that made my skin crawl. The guests erupted in applause. As they turned to walk back up the aisle, husband and wife, Lily caught my eye and blew me a kiss. My heart fractured just a little. That might be the last kiss she ever willingly gave me. The reception was in the grand ballroom, transformed into a sea of white roses and silver. I moved through the crowd, accepting compliments, making small talk, all the while feeling like a ghost at my own funeral. Eleanor, it's breathtaking, gushed my friend Beatrice. Lily looks so happy. And Julian is such a solid, successful young man. He's certainly something, I murmured, my eyes scanning the room. At 6:30, the guests were seated for dinner. The tables were works of art, but my addition was the most striking feature of all. At every place setting beside the fine china and crystal, lay a simple unadorned white envelope. I took my seat at the head table directly across from the newlyweds. Julian was basking in the glow of his perceived victory, his arm possessively around Lily's chair. He hadn't noticed the envelopes yet. The master of ceremonies, a jovial man named Richard, tapped his microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention. Before we serve dinner, the bride's grandmother, Mrs. Grace Vance, has asked that you open the small gift at your place setting, a personal token of her affection on this joyous day. A ripple of pleasant curiosity went through the room. 67 hands reached for 67 envelopes. The rustle of tearing paper was like the sound of dry leaves skittering across pavement before a storm. The first reaction was a sharp, strangled cough from table 4, where Julian's golfing buddies were seated. Then a gasp from table 7, where Lily's college friends had been giggling moments before. A wave of silence began to spread, table by table, as the guests absorbed the contents of my wedding favors. Lily noticed the shift first. Julian, she whispered, her smile faltering. Why is everyone so quiet? Julian's head swiveled, his eyes scanning the room, taking in the shocked faces, the whispered conversations, the looks of dawning horror and disgust. His gaze finally landed on me. I met it squarely and gave him a small, cold smile. What is this? A voice boomed from the back of the room. It was Mr. Henderson, a business associate of Julian's, or rather, a former victim. He stood up, holding the paper aloft. It says here you owe me $50,000 from that shipping logistics deal. The one that never existed. What? Lily said, her voice small and confused. Before Julian could respond, another voice chimed in. He promised me a 30% return on a tech startup. I lost 20 grand. He told me he was investing my inheritance. The police report. It says he was arrested for fraud in 3 states. The voices rose, a cacophony of anger and betrayal, crashing over the beautiful reception like a tidal wave. Julian was on his feet, his face pale, his composure shattered. "This is nonsense," he shouted, but his voice was drowned out. "Lies. Margaret, what have you done?" I took a slow sip of my water, placing the glass down with deliberate calm. "I granted your wish, Julian. You wanted me to disappear. So I'm taking my resources with me." I turned to Lily, whose face was a mask of confusion and dawning horror. "Including the Seafoam Cottage." I slid the real estate listing toward her. "It sold this morning. For cash." "You sold it," she cried, her voice breaking. "Our house? How could you?" "It was never your house, my dear," I said, my voice soft but carrying. "Just as it was never your idea to ask me to disappear." Lily stared at me, utterly lost. "Disappear? What are you talking about, Nana?" The room fell silent again, every ear straining to hear. "Last night," I said, my voice clear and steady in the hush, "your new husband told me that the perfect wedding gift would be my permanent disappearance from your lives. He said it was your idea, Lily. That you were too polite to tell me yourself." The color drained from Lily's face. She looked from me to Julian, her world collapsing in real time. I never said that. Julian, tell her. Tell her I never said that." But Julian was backing away from the table, a cornered animal. The wedding guests were now standing, closing in, their envelopes clutched in their hands like weapons. The beautiful ballroom had become a courtroom, and Julian Thorne had just been found guilty. I sat there, a 70-year-old woman in a lavender suit, and watched the carefully constructed life of a con man implode. And I knew with a deep, satisfying certainty that he would never ever forget the gift I had given him. The silence that followed my statement was more deafening than any scream. It was a vacuum, sucking the air from the room, leaving 67 people holding their breath. All eyes were fixed on Julian, who looked like a stag caught in the blinding glare of a hunter's lamp. "Julian." Lily's voice was a fragile thread, threatening to snap. "Answer her. Did you say that?" He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. His lawyerly glibness had deserted him. The evidence was not just in my words, but in the hands of every single person in the room. His financial house of cards was not just collapsing. It was being incinerated in a public square. A man from table 3, one of Julian's so-called investment partners, took a menacing step forward. "My lawyer is going to have a field day with this, Thorne. You'll be lucky if you see daylight before you're 60. The spell was broken. The room erupted into a chaos of shouted accusations, frantic phone calls to lawyers, and the shrill sound of weeping, not from Lily, but from other guests realizing the extent of their financial ruin. I saw Detective Miller, an old friend of my late husband's, who I had discreetly invited as my personal guest, move through the crowd. He placed a firm hand on Julian's shoulder. "Julian Thorne." His voice carried the weight of finality. "I think you'd better come with me. We have a lot to discuss regarding the contents of these wedding favors." As the handcuffs clicked into place, a sound so small yet so definitive, Lily finally broke. A raw guttural sob tore from her throat. She wasn't crying for the lost money or the sold beach house. She was crying for the shattering of a dream, for the humiliation, for the terrifying realization that the man she had just pledged her life to was a complete and utter stranger. She looked at me, her face a ruin of mascara and despair. "Nana, you knew? All this time you knew." "I suspected, my darling," I said, my voice soft. "And I did what any grandmother who loves her child would do. I investigated." The aftermath was a grim, slow-motion spectacle. The police led a shell-shocked Julian away. The wedding planner was having a quiet meltdown near the untouched 5-tiered cake. Guests filed out, some offering me sympathetic looks, others too angry or embarrassed to meet my eye. I found Lily alone in the library, the very room where this had all begun. She had taken off her veil, and her beautiful hair was a tangled mess. She looked up at me, and the betrayal in her eyes was a physical blow. "How could you do that to me?" she whispered. "In front of everyone? You humiliated me. I saved you, I replied, my voice firm despite the ache in my heart. Humiliation is temporary, Lily. A life tied to a criminal, a life of debt and lies and eventual abandonment. That is a permanent prison. I chose the lesser pain for you, even if you hate me for it. I never asked you to disappear, she cried, the words bursting from her. I would never say that. I know that now, I said. But last night, when he told me it was your idea, I believed him. Can you imagine what that felt like? To think my own granddaughter, the child I raised, wanted me erased. The fight went out of her. She slumped into a leather armchair, looking impossibly young and broken. He was isolating me, she murmured, the realization dawning like a terrible sunrise. All those times he said you were too critical, that you didn't respect our relationship. He was turning me against you. I simply nodded, letting the truth settle upon her. It was a bitter medicine, but it was the only antidote to his poison. Later that night, back in the quiet sanctuary of my home, my investigator, Mr. Albright, called. Mrs. Vance. His voice was characteristically grave. There's something you need to know. Thorne wasn't working alone. My blood ran cold. Explain. He has a partner. A man named Silas Crow. Their method is sophisticated. Thorne targets the granddaughter, gains her trust and affection. Meanwhile, Crow works on the grandmother, gaining her confidence, sometimes romantically, sometimes as a financial advisor. They play the long game. A new, more profound dread washed over me. This wasn't over. The next few days were a blur of legal consultations and difficult conversations. Lily moved back into her old room in my house, a ghost of her former self. The silence between us was a thick, uncomfortable blanket. I poured my energy into the information Mr. Albright provided. Silas Crow, age 55. Charming, well-dressed, presenting himself as a semi-retired venture capitalist. According to his pattern, he would have already identified his next target, a wealthy widow named Beatrice Irwin, who had a beloved granddaughter, Chloe, roughly Lily's age. I knew Beatrice slightly from charity committees. She was a kind, somewhat naive woman who had inherited her husband's fortune. Lily, I said one morning over breakfast, I need your help. She looked up from her uneaten toast, her eyes hollow. With what? Julian's partner is targeting another family, a woman named Beatrice Irwin and her granddaughter Chloe. The spark of anger that flashed in her eyes was the first sign of life I'd seen in days. Another one? He's doing this to someone else. He is. And we have a chance to stop it. I laid out Mr. Albright's plan. We needed to get close to Beatrice, to warn her without scaring Silas away before we had enough evidence for the police. I can't, Lily whispered, shaking her head. I can't face that world again. The lies, the pretending. You won't be pretending, I said gently. You'll be telling the truth. Your truth. And you'll be saving another young woman from the hell you just went through. She was silent for a long time, staring at her hands. Finally, she looked up, and I saw a flicker of my determined granddaughter returning. What do? We invited Beatrice Irwin to tea under the guise of discussing a donation to the botanical gardens. When she arrived, elegant and smiling, my heart ached for the shock we were about to deliver. Beatrice, this is my granddaughter Lily, I said. Of course, Beatrice said warmly. I heard about the incident at the wedding. My dear, I'm so sorry. Lily managed a small, genuine smile. Thank you, Mrs. Irwin. That's actually why we asked you here. We told her everything. About Julian. About the investigation. And finally about Silas Crow. I showed her the dossier Mr. Albright had compiled, complete with photos of Silas with other elderly women whose finances had been mysteriously drained. Beatrice's hand trembled as she held the photographs. But he's been so kind. He's been helping me with my investment portfolio. He said he could get me a 12% return. He will, I said softly. He'll get all of it, Beatrice. Tears welled in her eyes. My Chloe. She's been seeing a wonderful new man. His name is David. She's so happy. Lily reached out and took Beatrice's hand. Mrs. Irwin, does this David have a photo? With trembling fingers, Beatrice pulled out her phone and showed us a picture of her beaming granddaughter with a handsome, smiling man. Lily went pale. That's him, she whispered. That's Julian's friend, Mike. He was a groomsman. The pieces snapped into place with terrifying clarity. Silas was working on Beatrice while his accomplice, using the name David, was simultaneously courting Chloe. It was the same playbook. Beatrice Irwin began to cry in earnest, the horror of her narrow escape washing over her. We had reached her just in time. With Beatrice's cooperation, Detective Miller set a trap. She agreed to a dinner at her home with Silas Crowe, while Chloe, now aware of the truth, would be there with David. The dinner was an exercise in surreal tension. I watched from a monitor in a van outside, linked to hidden cameras in Beatrice's dining room. Lily sat beside me, her jaw clenched. On screen, Silas was the picture of charm, complimenting Beatrice's home, her taste, her wisdom. David was equally convincing, holding Chloe's hand and speaking of their future. Then Beatrice, following the script, gently steered the conversation. Silas, you've been so wonderful with my finances. It reminds me of my late husband's friend, Arthur Vance. Do you know him? Silas's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. The name doesn't ring a bell, my dear. His widow Eleanor is a dear friend, Beatrice continued, her voice sweet as honey. She's had such a time lately. Her granddaughter was nearly taken in by a dreadful con man. A man named Julian Thorne. The air in the dining room went electric. Silas froze, his fork halfway to his mouth. David visibly paled. I think I've read about that, Silas stammered. Have you? Beatrice pressed. It's a frightening world. They say Thorne had a partner. A man named Silas Crowe. That was the signal. Detective Miller and his officers moved in. The look of sheer panic shock on Silas's face was the confirmation we needed. As he and David were read their rights, Chloe burst into tears, but they were tears of relief, not despair. We had stopped them. In the ensuing days, the full scope of their operation became clear. Thorne and Crowe had been running this sophisticated grift for nearly a decade, leaving a trail of broken hearts and empty bank accounts across 3 states. Our evidence was the key that unlocked it all. Julian, faced with the testimony of his partner and the mountain of evidence, took a plea deal. 15 years in a white-collar prison. I went to see him one last time before his transfer. He looked smaller in his prison jumpsuit, the arrogance finally beaten out of him. You, he said, his voice flat. You ruined everything. No, Julian, I corrected him calmly. You ruined everything. I merely provided the cleanup crew. He shook his head. All I wanted was a comfortable life. At the expense of my granddaughter's soul, I replied. That was a price I was never willing to pay. As I stood to leave, he spoke again, his voice barely a whisper. Tell Lily. I'm sorry. I didn't reply. Some apologies are like feathers in a hurricane, too little, too late, and blown away without a trace. The real work began after the headlines faded. Lily's healing was a slow, fragile process. There were days of anger, of deep depression, of self-recrimination. We started seeing a therapist together. A wise woman who helped us untangle the knots of betrayal and rebuild our trust. One afternoon, Lily found me in my garden. Nana, she said, her voice steadier than it had been in weeks. All those people at the wedding. They lost money because of me. Because of Julian, I corrected her firmly. But I was his gateway. She took a deep breath. I want to make it right. I want to use my marketing skills. I want to help people like Beatrice. I want to create something good from all this mess. And so the idea for the Silver Shield was born. A nonprofit organization dedicated to educating seniors and their families about romantic and financial fraud. We launched the Silver Shield 6 months later. Lily was its driving force, her passion and personal experience giving her a credibility no textbook could provide. We set up a hotline, hosted workshops at community centers, and created a network of vetted financial advisors and legal counsel. Beatrice Irwin became one of our most generous donors and sat on our board of directors. Her granddaughter, Chloe, volunteered her time, her own near miss making her a powerful advocate. I provided the initial funding, of course. The money that would have gone to the wedding and the seafoam cottage found a far nobler purpose. We helped our first family within a month, a widow who recognized the too-good-to-be-true investor from one of our seminars. We had saved her life savings. Watching Lily command a room, her voice strong and clear as she shared her story to protect others, filled me with a pride so profound it brought tears to my eyes. The victim had become the protector. A year to the day after the wedding, a man came to our door. He was in his late 50s with a kind, weary face. "Mrs. Vance? My name is Robert Thorne. I was Julian's father." I ushered him into the parlor. He was a broken man, carrying the shame of his son's actions. "I had no idea," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "We disowned him years ago for stealing from the family business. We thought he'd moved on. I never imagined. I came to apologize. For my son. For the pain he caused your family. It was a moment of unexpected grace. The sins of the son were not the father's to bear. Yet here he was, doing so with a humility that his son would never possess. Your apology is accepted, Mr. Thorne," I said. "But the young woman you should speak to is Lily." Their conversation was private, but when Lily emerged, her eyes were red-rimmed, yet she looked lighter, as if a final chain had been unlocked. Life, as it always does, moved forward. The Silver Shield flourished, becoming a respected national resource. Lily found a new confidence, a strength forged in fire. She started dating again, slowly, cautiously. A young man from the tech world who admired her work and treated her with unwavering respect. One evening we were sitting on the porch watching the sunset. The seafoam cottage was still sold, a fact we had both made peace with. Its loss was the price of our freedom. "Nana," Lily said, breaking the comfortable silence, "I never properly thanked you." "You don't have to, my dear." "Yes, I do," she insisted, turning to me. "You were willing to let me hate you to save me. You took the blow publicly that was meant for me. You are the bravest person I know." She took my old wrinkled hand in her young, strong one. "He asked for the perfect gift. He got it. He got your disappearance from his life. But he gave me the perfect gift, too. He gave me back my grandmother." Tears, the good kind, finally welled in my eyes. So that is my story. The story of a 70-year-old woman who was told to vanish and instead found her truest purpose. The Margaret Henderson Foundation for Family Protection, which we named the Silver Shield, is now my life's work, run alongside my brilliant, resilient granddaughter. We've helped hundreds of families. We've stopped predators in their tracks. We've turned our pain into a fortress for others. Julian Thorne will be an old man when he gets out of prison, his handsome looks faded, his silver tongue silenced. I do not waste a single thought on him. My thoughts are on the future. On the families we haven't saved yet, but will. On the light in Lily's eyes that has returned, brighter and wiser than before. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. I disagree. The best revenge is a life lived with purpose, surrounded by love, and dedicated to ensuring that the darkness that tried to consume you never touches another soul. So I ask you now, from my study surrounded by the peace of a life well fought. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, if it reminded you of your own strength, or the strength of a grandmother who loved you, then hit that like and subscribe button. Your support helps us spread our shield a little wider. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to share your own story. Your voice matters.